Let's say you've got a question on Mr Utterson from Stevenson's Jekyll and Hyde. How is he presented? Which quotes do you use? What do you write? Let's find out, shall we? Let's presume that your question is something along the lines of explore how Stevenson presents the character of Mr Utterson in The Strange Case of Dr Jekyll and Mr Hyde. There are hundreds of ways that you could answer this question, but today we're going to look at three ways that Mr Utterson is presented. Now, in terms of Mr Utterson's key chapters, well, it's basically the first 8 chapters. The first 8 chapters follow Utterson around as he's trying to work out what's going on with his friend Henry Jekyll. The last 2 chapters are letters written by other people, but they are written to Utterson, so he's still relevant. First off, we'll look at quotations that show Mr Utterson is a good and caring friend, and the first quotation that shows us this is, "Oh my poor old Harry Jekyll," from chapter 2. First off, you have "oh my poor," showing that he has a lot of affection and sympathy for the situation of his friend. He's quite empathetic towards the dilemma that Jekyll has got himself into. Keep in mind that he doesn't judge Jekyll, he just feels sorry for him. And the Harry Jekyll bit tells us that he has an affectionate nickname for Henry Jekyll, telling us that they go a long way back and are actually quite close as far as friends go. Coming from the end of chapter 2, it turns me cold to think of this creature stealing like a thief to Harry's bedside. With this quotation, we see Utterson's care for his friend. It's this bit that sees him determined to get to the bottom of the whole Mr Hyde business. He decides he's going to dig up some dirt on Mr Hyde because he's worried about Mr Hyde's effect on Jekyll, and describes Hyde as almost like a vampire, sucking the life out of his friend. Also interesting that this early on in the novel, and he's already referring to Hyde as a creature, as animalistic, as less than human. And if you look at Hyde as a metaphor for the lower class, we get a little insight into Mr Utterson's, and also the Victorians', prejudices. 2 quotes from chapter 3 here. Utterson basically says, "Tell me what trouble you're in and I'll get you out of it." Note that he doesn't judge Jekyll for whatever he's got himself into. He suspects that Hyde may be blackmailing Jekyll, that Hyde may be the result of Jekyll's wild youth, and some modern scholars have suggested that Utterson suspects a homosexual relationship between Jekyll and Hyde, although Stevenson couldn't explicitly write that due to something known as the Obscene Publications Act of 1857. Either way, even though Utterson may suspect all of this, he doesn't abandon Jekyll. He wants to save him. In this case, Jekyll is on his way to becoming a down-going man, and Utterson may well be the last good influence in his life. And then we get the relationship between the pair from Jekyll's point of view. Jekyll is very appreciative to have a friend as caring as this, saying he can't thank Utterson enough. He even goes on to say that he trusts Utterson more than any man alive, even more than himself. A bit of foreshadowing there too. And when Poole turns up at Utterson's house distressed and he thinks there's been foul play back at the Jekyll house, Utterson barely asks any questions about it. He just gets his hat and coat and they're off. He realises something is not right and he races to save his friend from whatever has happened. And later in that chapter, Poole suspects that something bad has happened to Jekyll because he hasn't seen him in days, and Mr Hyde has been acting strange inside the laboratory, weeping like a woman or a lost soul. Utterson is determined to get to the bottom of it and save his friend if he can. He says that he considers it his duty to break down that door. Connotations of duty being an obligation, a responsibility. He sees it as his role to save his friend. We all need a friend like Mr Utterson in our lives, someone who will be there for us when we need them, even if we don't realise that we're in trouble. He's caring and he's determined and he'll do whatever is in his power to help his friend and his friend's reputation. More importantly, he doesn't seem to care about what Jekyll has done to need his help. His primary objective is to save his friend and his friend's reputation. Now, speaking of reputations, a bit of context research on the role of the Victorian gentleman would do you good. Victorian gentlemen lived by pretty strict rules and etiquette, and lots of the characters in Jekyll and Hyde would be classed as gentlemen. Utterson, Lanyon, Jekyll, for instance. Mr Hyde sticks out so much because he does not conform to these rules. A Victorian gentleman would earn a generous amount of money and will perform no manual labour. They do whatever they can to remain respectable. Their reputations are paramount. They are devout followers of Christianity. Mr Utterson is a perfect example of a Victorian gentleman, and this is shown in several ways. 1. He's austere with himself. Victorian society didn't approve of excess. They didn't think it looked good to indulge yourself. So the fact that Mr Utterson is strict with himself and drinks gin instead of vintage wine suggests that he would be liked in the Victorian age. He shows lots of self-restraint, showing him to be a strong-minded character. He doesn't do it once or twice, he makes a habit of it. The last good influence in the lives of downgoing men shows that people who have done wrong or are shunned by society can still call on Mr Utterson, even when nobody else will meet their eye. Not just as a lawyer, but as a friend. The abstract noun influence indicates that he even tries to help people when they're having a hard time, or when they're falling from grace in society. Helping others and being charitable is a typical trait of a Victorian gentleman. The reputation of a person is everything, particularly in the Victorian times. A gentleman would aim to protect the reputation of others where he can, and Utterson tries to do this here. When Enfield tells the story of Hyde trampling calmly over the little girl, he mentions that Mr Hyde came out of the door with a cheque in somebody else's name. Enfield doesn't mention the man's name, and Utterson suspects that it's Jekyll, but he doesn't say anything either. In fact, they make a point of discussing how bad rumours can get when names are thrown around, and instead, Mr Utterson says, "Let us make a bargain never to refer to this again." He suspects that his friend Jekyll might be in some trouble, and rather than gossiping about it, he asks Enfield not to mention the story again, at least not until Mr Utterson can investigate. In Chapter 2, Utterson is thinking about the connection between Jekyll and Hyde. He's wondering how they know each other, and how Hyde managed to get his name on Henry Jekyll's will. He thinks it could possibly be blackmail, because Jekyll had a bit of a wild side when he was younger, and it could be something to do with that. He doesn't say specifically what, but he suspects something. Now this causes him to reflect on his own life, and he concludes that his past was fairly blameless. I guess here he's comparing himself to Jekyll, and maybe he's a little smug that he's never done much wrong. We could interpret this as Utterson being quite a dull man, but also it shows us the high importance of reputation in Victorian society. In order to be considered a gentleman, men had to be respectable. They had to keep clean, they had to stay moral, they had to radiate that they were a good Christian. By reflecting on himself and comparing himself to Jekyll, we see the high status that the Victorians placed on reputation. Last, to show that Utterson was a true Victorian gentleman, where he was liked, he was well liked. In all of the dinner parties that this group of single, aging, upper-class men seem to go to, everyone seems to like Utterson. It says that he doesn't talk much, but people like that about him. He's just comfortable company. It also tells us that maybe some people say that they like someone because it would be confrontational if they didn't. However, people genuinely seem to like Mr Utterson. He is well liked. A typical Victorian gentleman, he ends up staying so neutral that people can't not like him. He tries not to offend in any way, and it works in his favour, raising his reputation all over London. A lawyer with a good reputation would get more work. So overall, Mr Utterson is a gentleman. He's a good man. He's respectable. He's moral. He acts as an extended metaphor for all Victorian gentlemen in this microcosm of Victorian society, and this makes him the perfect choice to be the narrator of the novel. We know he's a man of integrity and a gentleman, so we're more inclined to believe what he says, which is particularly important for a novel with so many unbelievable supernatural elements. Look at other Gothic texts such as Frankenstein or Dracula, and you'll find that the narrator, or the focus of the narration, is a reliable, respectable person, usually a gentleman, and Utterson fits right into this category. Or does he? There's definitely evidence to suggest that, like many Victorian men, on the surface he presented himself as respectable. But underneath, there's a different side to him. The Strange Case of Dr Jekyll and Mr Hyde is a novel about duality after all. So let's think about Mr Utterson being a little hypocritical. First off, he's a lawyer. Think about what that entails. A lawyer is supposed to uphold the law. They're supposed to know the law and are to advise their clients of the law. Because not everyone knows the law as well as a lawyer does, they're hired to represent clients in the court of law. And when we keep this in mind, some of Mr Utterson's choices start to seem a little odd. On the first page of the book, it says that Mr Utterson had an approved tolerance for others, sometimes wondering, almost with envy, at the high pressure of spirits involved in their misdeeds. almost as if he's jealous at some of the less savoury things that other people get up to, because he couldn't get away with them himself. As a lawyer, he couldn't go round fighting or getting drunk in public or causing other scandals. It would ruin his reputation and his business. And as we discussed earlier, reputations are incredibly important to Victorian gentlemen. But either way, Stevenson does point out that Utterson is envious of the people that can do these things. On the other hand, I think this quote humanises Utterson to some degree. It makes him more relatable as a character, because there's more to him than meets the eye. He has depth, and he's not just this flat character. It makes him seem more real, that he's not a perfect lawyer, but he has hidden desires and secrets. So it's not just Dr Jekyll and Mr Hyde that the theme of duality applies to. For an extra bit of context information in your essays, look up the Everyman morality play. Its central characters are supposed to be ordinary, pretty blank characters. The idea being that they represent all of mankind. Anyone can imagine themselves stepping into the shoes of the character. Would Utterson fit into this role? If so, it's up to you to argue how. And lawyers are supposed to be trustworthy, and yet when he seeks out Mr Hyde for the first time in chapter 2, Utterson makes out that Jekyll told him about Mr Hyde. He lies to Hyde's face, and Hyde, who everyone seems to hate, points out that the lawyer is lying to him, not behaviour that you would expect from a man of the law. And then in chapter 5, Mr Guest realises that Jekyll and Hyde have suspiciously similar handwriting. He tells Utterson, and the penny doesn't quite drop. Why would you believe that they're the same person? Instead, Utterson assumes that Jekyll is lying and is writing notes on the behalf of Mr Hyde, who, at this point in the novel, is wanted for the brutal murder of Sir Danvers Carew, a Member of Parliament. It says that Mr Utterson struggled with himself, and then, rather than telling the police that Jekyll probably knows where Hyde is hiding out, or rather than confronting Jekyll about his relationship with Hyde, Utterson tells Guest to forget the note, and the handwriting, and their conversation, and not to speak about it to anyone. Ever. And he just buries the subject, sweeps it under the rug. Again, not quite the behaviour you'd expect of a man paid to uphold the law. Again, Utterson tries to stage a cover-up. This quote is from right at the end of chapter 8. Utterson and Poole have broken down the door of Jekyll's lab. They found Hyde's dead body on the floor. They found a letter from Jekyll and another envelope with Jekyll's confession in it. And standing there in Jekyll's lab with, I'll say again, a dead body on the floor, Utterson doesn't go to the police. Instead he says to Poole, I would say nothing of this paper. If your master has fled or is dead, we may at least save his credit. Now you could argue that Utterson has been a good friend, he's a good man, and he's just trying to save the reputation of Dr Jekyll here. But it is odd behaviour. He spent time with Police Inspector Newcomen, who was trying to find Hyde. Now a quick letter to him would do it, or a visit to the police station, but instead he orders Poole not to say anything, and Poole, who is of a lower class and probably wanting to do the right thing, obliges. He doesn't tell anyone anything as far as we know. And then Utterson goes home, and he reads Lanion's statement once he gets it out of his safe, and that makes up chapter 9. There might be something in there about the safe being a metaphor for repression. That could be something to go into, something to explore. Anyway, he then reads Jekyll's confession that was found next to the dead body. That makes up chapter 10. And we don't find out what Utterson does, because the novel ends with Jekyll's confession. But after reading Lanion's statement, you'd think Utterson would at least consider going to the police before opening Jekyll's confession. Now, again, you could argue that Utterson is just the best friend that anyone could ask for, but it is very suspicious behaviour for a lawyer. And then we get to the motive. In place of the name Edward Hyde on Dr Jekyll's will, the lawyer, with indescribable amazement, read the name of Gabriel John Utterson. Utterson finds out that Jekyll replaced Hyde's name on the will with Utterson's. Does this tell us why Utterson decided not to go to the police? Because he inherited all of Dr Jekyll's wealth? £250,000 sterling, which, by the way, would be about £40 million in today's money. That's a pretty big motivator to stage a cover-up. It would mean that maybe he wouldn't have to drink gin to mortify a taste for vintage wine anymore. He could drink as much vintage wine as he liked with £250,000 sterling. He could cross the doors of a theatre every night of the week with that money. Now, I'm not suggesting any kind of conspiracy theory here. It's not like I'm saying Utterson orchestrated the whole thing, far from it. He just makes a series of choices that are unusual for a lawyer. It makes him seem hypocritical to uphold the law on the surface in his day job, and yet skirt the law in his own private affairs. If, after reading Jekyll's confession, Utterson doesn't decide to go to the police, we know why. £250,000 could make a pretty comfortable life for anyone, gentleman or not. Well, now that we've looked at a few things about Mr Utterson, here's a practice exam question for you to try out. For the best results, set yourself a timer and see if you can complete the question in time conditions. That's all for today. Thanks for watching and happy revising.